And now we're up to Daf Nun Zayin Amid Beis, and let's just remember that according to Rabbi Yochanan, the name of Shim Bar Yochai, we don't find Balei Chaim, live animals or birds that are asurim with what's called an Iser Olam, the Odom Chaim, while they're still alive, and therefore it's not logical to assume that the tzipar Hamishuleches of the two tziporim that are machshir the mitzora, the one that's sent out should be asur b'achila when it's still alive. The other one is a shchuta, and it makes sense that therefore that should be asura. So the Gemara now is going to barrage Rabbi Yochanan with a number of kashas, and in the name of Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Hare Muktzah. So an animal that was designated for Tikrovas Avodah Zarah, it's alive, to Balei Chaim Ninu Vasiri. And even while it's alive, it's Asur, as it says, Adam ki yakri michen karbal Hashem min abehem min abakum etzon takribas karban chem. And Rashi quotes the Gemara in Tmura on Daf Chav Ches, min abakar lahotzias ad nevad, min atzon lahotzias ad muktzah. So nevad, it already was worshipped, and muktzah means it was designated to be worshipped. And the Gemara answers, Ki asiri, when it says that muktzah and nevad are asur, that's only legavah. You can't be makriv them on the mizbeach. But lehejot mishra shari, you're allowed even to eat the flesh of these animals that were either muktzah or nevad. And that which Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rashbi, that we don't find Balei Chaim asurim, that means we don't find that there are surim for hejot, litzarech hejot. But as far as tzarech mizbeach is concerned, like krivim al mizbeach, that's a whole different story. But maskif lo Rabbi Yirmiyah, hare rovea v'nirva. Rovea is an animal that had a sodomy relation with a woman, a Jewish woman. Nirva had a sodomy relation with a Jewish man. And be edim, and this was done in the presence of two witnesses, the Balei Chaim Ninu Vasiri. And this has a halacha of niskal. The animal is stoned. And with regard to Rovea in Vayikra Chaf, it says Varagtas ha'isha v'esabehema. With regard to Nirva in the same parsha, it says v'esabehema tarogu. And there are surim b'hana. Now this Isur hana is derived from Shar and Niskal in the case of a Shar that killed a human being. And after Gmar Din, the Shar is Asur Bana, even though it's still alive. And these cases of Rovea and Nirveh are also subsumed under the category of Shar and Niskal, and the same dinim apply, namely that there's an Isur Hana after Gmar Din. Ella Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Bar Yochai. Yes, there are Balei Chaim that are Asurim like Rovea and Nirveh. But Lo Matzinu Rov Balei Chaim Asurim. Notice as a general rule, most animals that are alive in the world and roam the earth are not Asurim Ba'anah. And therefore, when we want to figure out which tzipar is Asur, which not, it's not logical to assume as a chidush that the tzipar Meshuleches would be Asur Ba'anah while it's still alive. And the pasuk V'zeh Asher Lo Tochelu should apply to the tzipar HaMeshuleches. It's more logical to assume that that pasuk applies to the tzipra shchuta, and the pasuk called tzipra tahora tochelu is referring to the tzipra meshulachas. The Bei Rabbi Shmuel Tana, in the Beis Medrash of Rabbi Shmuel, we learned that a meshulachas is muteris for a different reason. Based on the pasuk in Vayikra Yudal, the Yom Kra v'shilach. With regard to the tzipar hachaya that's not subject to shechita, it says v'shilach al pnei asodeh, and the Torah is now equating the tzipar to a sodeh. Kisodeh, ma sodeh muteres. There's no iser in the sodeh. Af hai, this tzipar likewise nami muteres. Gemara asks the following question: we need the word sodeh for something else. V'hai sodeh lo hachiyudi also. You want to use it to be matir the tzipar meshulachas? Hahu, that pasuk sada, I need mi boile, l'kenetanya for the brisa of sada shelo yamod bi yafo, that the person who's mishaleach, the tzipor, should not be standing within the boundaries and within the choma that surrounds Yafo, which is on the Yam, Yam, and then he sends off the tzipor to the Yam. And likewise, he shouldn't be standing big givas in an a city that is surrounded by a wall and situated in a desert, Vizur Kedel Midbar, and he throws the bird towards the midbar. Another example, he shouldn't send out the bird from outside the city to the inside of the city, but rather Sada teaches me, Ella if he's standing in the city, he should send the bird out outside of the walls of the city towards the Sada. So we don't have a free word, Sada, that can be used for the drasha of Debei Rabbi Shmuel. So the Gemara says, V'idach. So what does Debei Rabbi Shmuel hold? In Cain, we're going to derive two things from the word Sada. If the word Sada is only telling you in what direction he should be sending out the bird, then Nichtov cross Sada. It didn't have to add the hey of ha-sada. My ha-sada, Shema Minotarti, we're going to derive two halachas from the word sada. Ha-sada. Number one, that he should send it in the kivun, in the direction of the sada, not towards the yam, not towards the midbar, not towards the ear. And from the extra hey, we're going to derive to be mate, the tzipah mishuleches, like a sada, which is muteris. Rava Omar. Rava insists that it's not possible that a tzipah mishuleches would be asur ba'no. Lo omer Torah shalach l'takola. If you would send out this bird that's asur ba'no, then somebody might catch the bird. Unbeknown to him, that's a bird of sipar mitzora, which is asur ba'no. He's going to hunt down this bird, catch the bird, slaughter it, and eat it. And therefore, it doesn't make sense that if the Torah is commanding us to send out that bird, the bird should be asur, because then we have to be choshish for such a takol. The Mishnah continues, if a man marries a woman b'sa'ar nazir, the Kiddushin is invalid because sa'ar nazir is asur ba'no. Mi nolan, tiyomar kra kadosh yeh, gadel pera si'ar roshel. In Parshas Naso, the Torah calls the gadel pera, the sa'ar roshel, as kadosh. And we're going to darshan the pasuk as if it said kadosh with an extra vav, meaning shegidul yeh kadosh. And just like anything that's kadosh is asur ba'no, so to the gidul of the sarosh is kadosh. So the Gemara asks, "I kodesh tofes is dama, ma kodesh tofes is dama v'yotze l'chulin af sa'ar nazir tofes is dama v'yotze l'chulin." Should we come to the conclusion based on the analogy between sa'ar nazir and kodesh, that just like in the case of kodesh, if you sell kodesh, then the damim that you receive as payment for the kodesh become asur ba'no. The kodesh itself is yotzi l'chulin; it's a pidyon process, and the same thing should apply to seir nazir. That tofes is damav v'yotzi l'chulin. That if he sells the seir nazir, the damim, the money that he gets in exchange for the seir nazir, should be asur ba'no. And the seir nazir itself should be yotzi l'chulin, like in the case of selling kodesh. And the Gemara answers, mi karin in kodesh, even though we, so to speak, added the vav to the word kadosh, but we don't add it in a way that we read it as kodesh, but rather as kadosh. So the vav that we're adding here is after the dalet, not before the dalet. And kadosh karinan, we don't read it as kodesh, but as kadosh. And therefore, kodesh means it's not like kadosh, which is tofes is domav, but rather in and of itself, it is kadosh. And it remains kadosh. and remains asur bana, even if you sell it and you exchange it for dummy. The Mishnah continues, if he's mekadesh bepeter chamor, it's asur bana, and therefore ain't mekudeshes. The Gemara has name masnisin to lo Rabbi Shimon to Sanya. We're going to prove from a brisa that Rabbi Shimon is the bar plugta of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says peter chamor asur bana. Rabbi Shimon is matir. Rabbi Shimon holds that peter chamor is mutar bana, and that's even before pidyon. So our Mishnah that says that if he was mekadesh and isha bepeter chamor, the Kiddushin is not valid because asur bana, is in contrast to the shita of Rabbi Shimon. The Gemara says no. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Huna, our Mishnah is talking about a case where he's mekadesh and isha bepeter chamor liachar arifa, after he did the arifa, and in that situation, Rav Shimon is modeh, concedes that it's asur bana, because we have a hekesh between two arifos, what we call arifa. We've got arifa in Petach Hamor. We have arifa in Egla Arufa. In Petach Hamor, the pasuk says in Parshas Bo v'chol Petach Hamor tifte b'seh v'im lo tifte v'arafto. And in Egla Arufa, in Parshas Kititza, it says v'orfo sasagolu b'nochal. So we have a hekesh of Arifa. And just like in Egla Arufa, after Arifa, the calf is asur bana, so to Petach Hamor, after Neraf, Rosho, it's asur bana. Divrei Hakol, and this is something that even Rav Shimon concedes. Basa b'chol minol, and how do we know that Basa b'chol is asur bana? The Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel, very famous drasha, Los Vashel Gedi b'chalevi moshlosh pa'amim. 3 times over the Torah repeats Los Vashel, Echad le'isra chila, Echad le'isra na, the Echad le'isra bishul. So there are 3 different lavim, 3 different isurim included under Basa b'chol. There's an isra chila, isra na, and an isra bishul. So imagine if you were studying to be a chef in a chef school in Chutz La'aretz, let's say, and there's Basa b'cholav inside the pot, and they want you to cook it, that would be a violation of the Isur Bishul. So the Gemara says, "Umasnisin to loki haitan." However, there is a Tana that holds that Basa b'cholav is mutar bana, and our Mishnah that invalidates Kiddushin with Basa b'cholav is against that Tana. The Sanya we learned in the Brayso Reb Shimon ben Yehuda Omer Basa b'cholav Basa b'achilu mutar bana. Shenemar ki am kadosh ato Hashem Elokecha lo savashel gedi b'chalev imo. Now the beginning of this pasuk am kadosh Hashem ato Hashem Elokecha is a reference, an allusion to the Isur Treifa, because lahalanu Omer v'yadshei kodesh tiyoli ubasar basar the Treifa lo sochelu. So it means that it says Am Kadosh with regard to Basa b'cholav, and it says Anshi Kodesh with regard to Treifa. Malahalon b'Treifa, where it says Anshi Kodesh, is the Basa is also b'achilu mutar bana, because the Torah says Lakel tashlich and also to be matir adna. Is Afkan here too, by virtue of the equation of Anshi Kodesh, is Basa b'cholav is also Am Kadosh, and it's also b'achilu mutar bana. That's the sheet of whom? Of Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda. Now we get to Chulin, Shenishkatu Bazora. If he marries her, then it's not a valid Kiddush, Asur Bana, Minal Emili. How do we know the Chulin, Shenishkatu Bazora is Asur Bana? The Gemara brings a source of Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Meir. Let's emphasize. Mishum Rabbi Meir. Amra Torah, with regard to Shchitas Kodshim. Okay, we're going to have an equation here between Shchitas Kodshim and Shchitas Chulin. And in Shchitas Kodshim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Bnei Yisrael, Shchot li, Bishali. I want you to shech the karbanos for me and in a place that is mine, meaning the Azara. And that's what the Torah means at the beginning of Sefer Vayikra v'shachat es ben abakar lifnei Hashem. Shalcha, Hashem says, but what about shechting for you, meaning basar chulin? Bishalcha, shechted bisharecha, chutz la'azara. As the pasuk says, I believe it's in Parshas Re'eh, v'zavachta mibkarcha mitzonacha umitzoncha bisharecha. Emphasize the word bisharecha. So just like you have to shecht karbanos in the Azara, you have to shecht chulin outside the Azara. And what do we derive from this equation? Ma shali bishalcha. Just like in the case of my karbanos, if you shechted outside of the Azara, asur b'ana. And the reason for that is simple, because it was kodesh, behegdesh kudush saguf, which generates an Isra no michayim, and now you went ahead and you shechted it. There was nothing to be mafkia, to be matter the Isra of kodesh. The only way of being matter the Isra kodesh is through shchita, bazora, and zrikas adam al mizbeach. Afshalcha, so too with your chulin, if it was shechted b'shali, in my place, my location, in the Azara, asur hu b'ana. And Rabbi Meir continues, shall I take this equation to its logical conclusion? That just like in Kodshim, if you shech them b'shalcha outside the Azara, onush kares yichayv kares, af shalcha b'shali, if you shech chulin b'Azara, is onush kares. So in other words, it's not enough to derive the Isra Hana in chulin b'Azara from Kodshim. You got to go a step further, and you got to derive the chiyuv kares. And that's going to lead you to the conclusion that if you shecht kodshim b'chutz yichayv kares. So Meir says, he rejects it. He says, Omakra, the Torah says, Vel pesach ol moed lo hevio, la'akriv karban Hashem v'nichras. The Torah goes out of its way to describe the scenario in which you're chayav kares v'nichras, and it's what? It's al karban. On the case of a karban, that he didn't bring it into the Azara to shecht it, but rather he stayed al Pesach ol moed outside the Azara. He shechted the chutz Azara onish kares. But chulin shenishktu Azara ain't onish kares. And now the Gemara is going to ask, wait a minute, Rabbi Meir is inconsistent. If he's making a distinction as far as kares, maybe he should make a distinction as far as the Isra Hana is concerned. Equal and mifrach, we should reject Rabbi Meir's logic and say the following: Malish aliva shalcha shekein onish kares. Maybe since in the case of shchitas kodshim b'chutz, where there's a chiyuv kares, and yet you're going to tell me that in shechting chulin b'azor there's no chiyuv kares, then let's apply that logic to the Isra Hana. And why not say that if person shechts chulin b'azor there's no Isra Hana? Elomar Abaye, from whence do we derive the Isra Hana chulin shenishkutu b'azor mihacha? From the limit of the Brisa. And this limit of the Brisa is based on the fact that in the Parsha of Akrava Shlomim, 3 times over the Torah repeats the word V'shachat. Number 1, V'shachato Pesach ol Moed. Number 2, V'shachat also lifnei ol Moed. And number 3, V'shachat also lifnei ol Moed. 3 times. Tlasa Kroy Yisera. It means that there are 3 mi'utim from these 3 redundant V'shachat. And this lashon of v'shachta or v'shachat also comes to be memay to tell you dafka you should shecht it Pesach ol moed. And what is it that you shecht Pesach ol moed? It's a behemas kodshim v'lo acher. Uma talmud lomar. What do we derive from this? Number 1, lefisha nemar. At the story in Dvarim Yud Beis of the entry of Bnei Yisrael to Eretz Yisrael, it says Ki Yirchak Mimcha Makom V'Zavachta Berichuk Makom Atazovech. The Torah is matter you to Shech Mivkarko Mikarecha Berichuk Makom, far away from the Azara. But he had to Zoveach B'Makom Karav. But you're not allowed to Shech Chulin in a Makom Karav, which is called the Azara. And for this we learn Prat L'Chulin Shalom Nishkatu B'Azara. I'm sorry, Shalo Yishachtu B'Azara. The Brisa continues. And this is a long, long Brisa. Ainli Elat Mimin. You have a behema which is not blemished in any way, and it's royal of his bear. Really correct. Sinala Shechted. In the Azar, because it's royal to the Azara, had even marked the shit, but it's cool. And the Torah says you could check the Berichuk Makom, but not Bazar. But Minayin L'Rabos Balei Mumin. Let's say you have a blemished behema, that's Chulin, and it's not royal akrov, so it can never come up Pesach Ol Moed. So the answer to this, says the Bryce, is, you know why I'm going to include Bal Mum in the Isa Shchitas Chulin Bazora? Marbani is Bali Mumin Shekei Mina Machshir. The min itself is Kashal Akrov. Even though this specific member of the species, this particular Elsie, the cow, has a mum, but cows in general could come, if they are Tmimim, in the Azor. And therefore it's logical to consider this animal, even though it has a mum, as if it didn't have a mum. And the Isser of Chulin Bazar would apply. Minayin l'Ravos Achayim. For example, Tzvi Vayal, how do we know that if he shechts them Chulin Bazara, it's Asur? The pasuk that's talking about Richuk Makom is not talking about Tzvi Vayal, and the Bryce answers that just like a behema needs shchita, so too a chaya needs shchita, and therefore we're going to equate the two together. And with regard to shchita bazar, the isur of shchita askul bazar is going to apply not only to behema but even to a chaya. Minayin l'ravos ha'ofos. How do we know that the isur of shchita bazar of chulin bazar applies to ofos? Talmud Lomar, it says 3 miyutim, ushchato, v'shachato so, v'shachato so. One is coming to exclude that dafka also tishchat pesach al moed v'lo chulin bali mumin. So even though it's a bal mum, and it's not royal in mizbech, nevertheless the Torah tells you have to shecht it chutz li ol moed. And now we have another miyut that's coming to include chaya, that you're not allowed to shecht a chaya in the azor if it's chulin. And now we have a third one to exclude ofos, that you're not allowed to shecht an of chulin in the azor. Yachol the Brisa continues, and I think shalo yishchat v'im shachat ye mutter. Maybe the Torah is telling me that you're not allowed to shecht ba'azorah because it's chulin, but b'di'evet, if you shecht it, it's mutar b'achilu. Talmud Lomar, ki yirchak mimcha makom v'zavachta v'yachalta. Ma ata zoveach b'richuk makom ata ochel. That which you're allowed to shecht, namely chutz la'azorah, which is chulin, you can eat. V'ata ochel ma sheta zoveach b'makom karov. Prat l'chulin shenishkatu ba'azorah. V'yeinli elat mimim. And once again, I need to go through the whole rigmarole with regard to a b'di'evet if he shechted it, this chulin in the azara. So first I only know Tmimim. If the animal has no blemish and it was shechted in the Azara, and it's royally carved al gabi mizbeach, that I know.